Copyright disclaimer. Under Title 17 U.S.C. Section 107, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing nonprofit, educational, or personal use. Tips a balance in favor of fair use. Chapter 14, Black Sunshine. The light you see at the end of the tunnel is the front of an oncoming train. David Lee Roth. We were in the barn, sleeping in our bunks. I was dreaming about a new world. Pink-colored rows of thin trenches bent around the horizon. A green sun dominated the sky, beckoning me. It was an unnatural scene, like a candy world. I knew exactly what it meant. There was hope in the future. I woke up, pushed small pieces of rubbish off my face and pillow, and jumped down to the concrete floor, smashing whatever already destroyed items I landed on. I had been sleeping in my black tank boots again. My eyes rolled around the room, searching for focus. I wanted to watch Hellraiser again, but the VHS tape was blown to bits. I peered down at the floor, searching through the patterns of firecracker shrapnel and trash. There we go. Roll your own tobacco. I rolled myself a pregnant cigarette as Johnny slept on. Outside, I heard some activity. I went out to see... Hold on. I went out to see what was happening, but no one was there. The barn was empty. It was quiet. It was just me and the early morning chill. I wondered how my story would end. That night, I had sex for the first time with a girl who came down from the upper ranch. I was no longer a virgin after what seemed like an eternity. It was a miserable failure. I didn't have any more sex. It wasn't for me, yet. Over the next few weeks, things slowly started picking up at the ranch. Somehow the staff seemed relieved. They were being nicer and nicer toward me. I was becoming popular with them, even though I hardly left the barn area anymore. Ruth Ann Crew, wife of Auditor David Crew, was a senior ethics officer. She didn't seem to like us very much. So when I add in, I'm adding my own here. Isn't it great that you had adults supervising all this abuse of children? What's her name again? You had David Crew and Ruth Ann Crew, who she didn't seem to like the kids very much. Isn't that great? So some of these folks, we don't need to save them. You've been here a long time, Nathan. I nodded. It's because Nathan wasn't with the program of mind control. Why haven't you graduated yet? I don't know. There are just too many steps. It would take forever. I was answering in the way I imagined normal people would. I'll tell you what, you keep your nose clean for a while and I'll see what I can do. I agreed. The exchange meant nothing to me. None of these robots meant anything to me. She and the rest of them could fall off the earth for all I cared. One by one, I had similar exchanges with several more staff. These were gatekeepers, or handlers. There was no way to finish the program without their blessings. And suddenly, after all this time, they seemed eager to get me through the program. They knew he was going to turn 18, that's what I think. It didn't add up to the casual observer. I, however, was no casual observer. This was my entire life. Yeah, didn't they have him locked up in this ranch for like 6-7 years or something like that? Yeah, now they want to be nice, which means they're after something. She and the rest of them could fall off the earth for all I cared. One by one, I had similar exchanges with several more staff. These were gatekeepers. There was no way to finish the program without their blessings. I think I read it again. And suddenly, after all this time, they seemed eager to get me through the program. It didn't add up to the casual observer. I, however, was no casual observer. This was my entire life. I knew everything about this place. I knew them inside and out. I knew exactly what was happening. Lance David and Karen Bernoff were another married staff couple with kids on the program. Lance was the graphic designer and all-around marketer. He created the website and edited the images. He made the flyers and advertisements for the ranch. A common photo of the front gate shows a large wooden sign above it. MK Ranch. Huh. Kind of like MK Ultra? Huh. What do I know? That sign never existed. They were too cheap for a sign. Instead, they added one with Photoshop and slapped it on the website. Another part of his job was lying to parents and the public. They sent out a flyer which read, "By actual survey, over 87% of our students who have completed the program have remained stable after returning home." On it were photos of kids before and after pictures, like the success stories, most of which were taken out of order. The before was after the after. After finding the flyers one day, I asked Lance what the statistic meant. He told me it referred to kids who didn't get arrested or sent back to the ranch within 6 months of graduating. The numbers didn't sit right with me. Fixing numbers, but. So many kids came back after graduating or got into trouble. We decided to tally the results ourselves. Several kids and I sat around recounting every graduate for the prior 4 years. The actual percentage of students who completed the program and remained stable for 6 months after graduating turned out to be right around 8. Not 87% or 50% or 20%. It was 8%. That didn't even count kids who got in trouble only a month or two after the deadline. We tallied it straight. We were interested in the truth, somewhat of a rarity with the adults. Approximately 8% of the graduates any of us knew over the span of 4 years stayed out of trouble for 6 months after graduating. We didn't count all the kids that stayed for a couple years and eventually got taken out because their parents ran out of money. Remember Nathan Rich, his grandpa, had left a lot of money to the grandma. And then they just let the poor kids sit in there. Approximately 8% of the graduates any of us knew. Oh, I already read that. Word of mouth advertising was even more important than flyers, though. The Scientology community forms an echo chamber where anecdotal evidence reigns supreme. Like the LAPD. What's true is true for you. The mantra of the unintelligent. It's true. It's true. Convincing parents that the ranch program worked was very important. They knew parents would talk to other Scientologists and get more kids in. Normally, this was an urgent matter. But I was a different kind of case. I had been there longer than any of them. J.K., the lady security guard, who helped kidnap me, coined the term for Johnny and me. She and some others referred to us as the two black sunshines, from a White Zombie song, probably also referring to us always being in black. I accepted the name. There was sunshine in me somewhere. There had to be. These names and phrases I heard for so long were just part of life. Black sunshine? A commentary about the darkness inside me? Can everyone see it? Other people giving names to Prometheus. Weird. You guys know that was his altar. I wouldn't be their black sunshine for long. I could sense it. With all the newfound interest the staff had in me, things were going to change. I knew these ranch people all too well. They were making a big move. I think it's love bombing. I was already 17. Boy, did I call that, you guys. Did I call that? Did I call that or what? I was already 17. If I turned 18 without graduating, they would look bad. It would look like I had been there for so long and made no progress. This could end money. Maybe the money would run out. I don't know. This couldn't happen. The staff would make sure of it. Public relations are of the utmost importance to these idiots. I knew all of this by the time the staff began courting me. I had a choice to make. Family handling. My options at that time were few. The first option was to go about my business, ignoring them as best I could. When I turned 18, they would have to let me out the gate. I would walk out of the main road and hitchhike to Albuquerque. When I arrived there, I would be free. That sounded fine to me, except that I would have no money, no food, no education, no job, no skills, no friends, no family, no ride, no home, no ID, and nowhere to go. The other option was to go along with their charade. Play a good boy and graduate within a month or two, they said. That would get me back on speaking terms with my family and get me a ticket back to Florida, with a place to live and the security of having a home. I decided that was the way to go. One final investment into my mother's wishes. One last shot at anything close to normal. I flew through the steps of the program so quickly, I must have broken several records. All the kids knew what was happening as much as I did. I was being fast-tracked for PR reasons. It had happened before. So it's the only reason the children are there for, you know. I had to bleach my hair and change my clothes to brighter colors. Brighter colors. This showed I was no longer out of valence, no longer being someone else. I didn't care what they thought. I would have dyed my hair pink and worn overalls if they asked me to. I was committed to seeing it through. I had to do future planning, a relatively straightforward step of the program. Write out specific plans for life after the ranch. All the plans needed to involve more Scientology, auditing, and courses. There was no future planning without Scientology. Your future involved Scientology, or you weren't graduating. Okay, done. As the steps were flying out of the way, I knew I was going to have to do step 9, family handling, which was there purely for the enjoyment of the parents, or parent in my case. In theory, the step was, the family and student learn how to maintain good communication and work out problems and upsets. In practice, it was a step in which the ranch kid apologized profusely. Yeah, isn't that funny? The kids have to apologize when they were the ones getting abused. The ranch kid apologized profusely for everything, which was all their fault, and did conditions up to and including liability. This meant begging for forgiveness in writing from the family. The final humiliating admission of fault. Almost sounds like a Freemasonic humiliation ritual. But what do I know? My family had disconnected from me until graduation, so I needed to prove I was finally upstat enough to speak with them. After some glassy-eyed shows of obedience in front of the right people, they contacted my mother and convinced her to speak to me. They were desperate to get me graduated. With staff sitting at my side ready to take over the call if there was any kind of argument, I received a call from my mother. It was the first time I was allowed to speak to anyone in my family for nearly 3 years. Isn't that great? Showtime. Hello. Apprehensiveness. Hi, Mom. Hi. She was short. It's been a long time, huh? There was no opportunity to talk to her the way I really wanted to. Not anymore. These were all moves in a game. She seemed cautious, unbelieving. The only thing for me to do was feign apologizing. Present my ethics conditions, kiss butt, take all the blame. It's all Scientology, kids. I was aware by doing that I was setting the tone for my home life. I'd have to deal with that later. First, though, I had to out-manipulate the manipulators. I knew that for fake reconciliation to work, the human psyche doesn't allow for a drama-free exchange. There must be some struggle and release, or it just doesn't feel believable. I got in the smallest debates with her I could manage. I wish you'd sent my stuff, Mom, but I understand why you didn't. No, I understand, yeah. I didn't understand how she could not send me anything, but I did understand why she didn't. My stuff included black clothes. She must have felt she was sending me an out ethics toolkit by sending me black things. Better to just let him sort out getting new clothes than to pass on this in theta, she must have thought. Mom, when I come home, what is my home life going to be like? I mean, I think I can use some more independence. The staff was getting uneasy. This wasn't supposed to be a negotiation, but a submission. I doubt even those staff around me had figured out how to do this better than me. You had better try to negotiate, or it just wasn't believable. What kid could go through hell and just bounce back without any reaction? I had to present microscopic disagreements, easily handled by the other side. This left the impression there were only a few things left to solve, and that we had solved them over the phone right then and there. These cultists created a cultural lore of people being able to read minds and use supermental powers. They reinforced this belief into their echo chambers. Really, though, they were weak, desperate people, easily overcome by my basic psychological strategies. I developed them by ignoring Lafayette's writings and just observing. All I needed to do then was rise above the pain and emotion, at least temporarily, and deliver the payload in words. Their robotic minds react in a predictable fashion. My mother was a different story. Potentially. She was very smart. She was an all-in, fully indoctrinated Scientologist, but extremely intelligent. I had to deal with her meticulously. Every word, pause, or tiny reaction was critical. I mean, I don't really want to have strict rules, you know. She paused and then surprised me. I wasn't planning on really having any rules for you, she said. Then she laid out what my new life was going to be. I have a guest house that you can stay in alone. You'll need to pay rent, but I can help you get a job. You're almost 18 now, so I'm really not going to have any rules for you. I just want to add in here, how many years has she been without her son? Like 6 years? See how they treat their children? It was strange to hear this, and I kept feeling there was going to be a catch, but she sounded confident that this was how it would be. Great news indeed. The rest of family handling was as expected. I admitted being all wrong. I apologized for the out ethics just because he thought on his own. That's all he was doing. And the trouble I caused my family. I got signatures for my mother and the rest of the immediate family via fax. They didn't fight back too much, though they did make me do a few more amends. I mean, this kid has been in hell for 6 years, but that wasn't enough for them. After years spent at agonizing pace, the ranch program breezed by in the final hour. No one was concerned about how obvious a sham it was, least of all me. A graduation date was set, and the family worked out who would come visit for graduation. In the meantime, Johnny left the ranch again and headed to his family's new home, Washington. They moved from Albuquerque to the most northwestern state in the continental U.S. I was on my own now in this game of wit. There wasn't going to be any more support from him. A staff member told me my mother was coming out with my aunts, cousins, and maybe my grandmother. The stage was set. Graduation. Soon thereafter, my family arrived and the graduation ceremony was scheduled. Everything's like what do they call that? Horse and pony show. I had bleached hair, grown out, and let down to hide the mohawk. They never allowed me to spike my mohawk at the ranch anyway. I was wearing borrowed clothes that weren't black. I had no earring in and carried a persona that was as innocent and reformed as possible. I was out of Valence, this time for real. They showed up in several vehicles. My whole family came out. They were there to verify rather than to celebrate. Isn't that great, you guys? This is what kids mean to Scientologists. I suspected. I put on a big show for them, playing down the torture of living there. Because clearly none of them gave an F about it, right? You guys know this, right? The graduation ceremony was pathetic. It took place in the course room and consisted of only a few prepared stories from staff and students. Uncle Mike hosted the event. There were some Lafayette quotes, followed by the prepared stories and anecdotes. We all know that dealing with Nathan in the past has been hard. Sometimes things got heated. An inside joke about forest fires. Great. I'm proud to call him my friend and recognize him as a productive member of the group. The group being referred to here, of course, was Scientology. The drivel came out for around an hour. I hid my distaste for the process, cringing when people hinted at things I didn't want my mother to catch wind of. Be easygoing, relaxed, pleasant, theta. Those remaining few kids who knew me well couldn't help but be happy for me. This was my only way out, and they were witnessing the end of an era. I felt the connection in the air. The lackluster ceremony ended with me receiving a certificate and reading a wonderful success story about how much the ranch had changed me. That's what mind control and beatings and abuse does, isn't it? It was awkward being so phony, so fake. After the ceremony, some of the kids poked fun at how enormously overweight my family was. I, too, was surprised at how quickly they had gone downhill in terms of body health, especially my mother. My cousins were obese. My mother, aunts, and grandmother were all morbidly obese. My grandmother, Frances, took me to Albuquerque to go shopping. I got my reward for graduating clothes. I convinced her to buy me some Doc Marten boots, which wasn't an easy sell. She must have felt trapped buying them because she was obviously struggling with how to justify paying over $100 for boots. Soon enough, I packed up my borrowed clothes and the few items I had acquired and headed out to the airport. It was surreal being around my family again. They acted like nothing had happened these past few years. Everything was back to normal for them. As we drove out of that gate, I felt a comfort knowing I would never, ever be at that ranch again. I was at the Mace Kingsley Ranch in Palmdale for 8 months and 11 days. I was at the Mace Kingsley Ranch in New Mexico for 3 years. Almost exactly to the day. In early September 1999, I finally left that dump forever. Oh, he wasn't there as long as I thought he was. It's long enough. I couldn't show any emotions. This place saved me, after all. Be thankful. It's always how it is, right? Be thankful to your abusers. It's always the same story. When I look back on those days, I like to think the ranch was never the same after I left. I like to think I left a mark on those staff and students. But like so many other things I believed over the years, the evidence just isn't there. Most of my friends from the ranch have moved on from those days, and some of my closest ranch friends don't even talk to me anymore. Many of the kids are now full-time Scientologists, following Scientology policies to disconnect from me for exposing these abuses. Some of them have disappeared completely. No social media, no presence online. No one anywhere has any idea what happened to them. Several kids attempted bluicide after returning home, and some succeeded. There you go, you guys. There you go. Government doesn't care. LAPD doesn't care. FBI doesn't care. Department of Justice really doesn't care. The scars and trauma from this place affect everyone differently. For me, their effects have never stopped. I thought getting out of the ranch was going to bring me some normalcy for once, but I've been wrong many times in my life. Many, many times.